Hi friends, I am so excited to create this video for you. There's so many of you on my channel who are students and you're studying really hard and really trying to understand the content. And so I'm really excited to give you some of my tips for how to study well and how to study so that you actually remember what you've learned. Some people, I think, spend hours and hours of study, but they really only remember such a minuscule amount in comparison to the amount of time that they've spent studying. What I want for you is I want you to be able to study and for your time to be meaningful, that you'll be able to remember as much of your study as possible. And so these are my top tips for you and how to make that happen. So your brain is the most important part of your body. Its job is to keep you alive. Now that's really important when it comes to learning. Your brain's number one job is to keep your body alive. If it thinks it's going to do something that actually is not related to keeping you alive, then your brain is not going to remember it. Okay? It wants to save all its energy to make sure that you're just alive. So, how do we make sure that our brain knows that when we're going to sit down and study, it's actually worthwhile and your brain needs to work and expend energy on learning that content? You need to answer two questions. Is what I'm about to do important? And does it have meaning? How do you do this? How do you let your brain know that what you're about to do is important and it has meaning? Before you set out to study, you need to write a really nice, clear learning intention. So what is it that you want your brain to learn by the end of that study session? Writing your own learning intention for your study session sets your brain on a course for learning. It lets your brain know, okay, we're about to learn something right now, so I need to get myself into that position where I can learn it best. This also will help you to chunk your study so that it's not overwhelming, and it gives you a direction and purpose in what you're doing. I think if you sit down thinking, I'm going to study now and I'm going to study chemistry, your brain doesn't know where to start, you don't know where to start, and so it can be quite overwhelming and a lot of time can be wasted. If you write a really specific learning intention, then it's going to give you a lot more focus and help your brain to focus. So rather than saying, I'm going to learn about chemistry, I want you to sit down, write an intention that sounds more like, okay, by the end of this study session, I'm going to understand open and closed systems and equilibrium reactions. Specific, to the point, and it will help you to know where to start in your study. You might start then by looking at the definitions of open and closed systems. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the pyramid of learning retention. I want you to consider the different teaching and learning methods that I put up on the screen. Now, if you could order them from least effective to most effective in terms of your learning and your retention of that learning, what would you rate them? What would you put up as the least effective, where you might only remember a smidgen of it? Or what are you going to put up as the most effective, where you're going to learn most of it if you get to do that thing? So here's the number for that. So the numbers here is the percentage of learning that you would remember 24 hours later if you just did that one thing. So if you sat in a lecture or you sat watching a lecture for 60 minutes, how much of that lecture are you actually going to remember 24 hours later? Only 5%. Like, that is not even worth your time. If you're doing study by watching lectures, I'm really sorry to tell you. No, I'm excited to tell you. That's a waste of your time, because we can change that. We can make sure that your time is so valuable. We can make sure that you're studying in a way that's going to help you. Reading. If you're just reading through notes, it's only going to get you 10%. You're only going to remember 10%. And this is only 24 hours later. Like, what is that going to look like a week later? Maybe 1%? Audio visual, 20%. Demonstration, 30%. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Discussion groups, 50%. Practice by doing, and I know that that's not always doable. I mean, I'm in a practical subject, so for chemistry, you can't just go home and do lots of chemical experiments. I get that, but I'll help you with that as well. And teaching others or immediate use of learning, 90%. So can you be expected to actually remember 90% of what you learn when you're studying? Yes. Yes, you can. This is how we're going to do it. So you're going to need to use a range of these in your study. So you might need to learn something by doing a bit of extra reading. You might need to learn something by watching a YouTube video. That's completely fine. When you're selecting your YouTube videos, maybe try and select something that is a practical demonstration, something that has audio visual, it's a practical demonstration, maybe it shows you an experiment or something in real life. That is going to be helpful. Okay, that's what I create in my videos because I know that it's going to help you much more than me just lecturing at you. But you can't just leave it there. You actually need to try and find someone to teach. Now, one of the reasons that the discussion groups and teaching of others have such a high percentage of retention of that knowledge is because you're actually able to hear your learning in your own voice. So you're hearing what you've learned said out loud in your own voice. And that makes a huge difference for your retention of that knowledge. So if you don't have a study group or you don't have someone to teach, what you need to do, the next best thing would be for you to pretend that you do. So pretend that you're teaching someone what you've just learned. Say it out loud in your own voice, and that will help you to work towards that 90% retention. Okay, the next tip is to take brain breaks. How long should you study for? Should you be sitting down and trying to study for 3 hours without a break and just sitting there? Probably not. A student's attention span is approximately their age in minutes. So for example, a 15-year-old will have approximately 15 minutes of high-level concentration before their brain starts to need a break. A 10-year-old will have about 10 minutes. And the thing about this is that students, you cannot fight your brain characteristics. You cannot fight the way that your brain is wired. So if you are 17 years old, you probably can only study for about 17 minutes before your brain's concentration level starts to decrease. Unfortunately, I mean, I'm older than that. Once you get to about 21, you don't get any extra concentration time. So if you're 30 or 40 or 50, you still only get about 21 minutes of that high level concentration time. But this is really important for you to understand because there's actually no point you sitting in a chair for longer than that because your brain capacity is just dramatically decreased and your productivity is going to be decreased as well. So this is also why relates back to the last point that I said about watching lectures. It's not going to be a good use of your time because you're only going to retain 20% of what you listen to. And if it's a long lecture, your concentration is just going to plummet. So what can we do about that? How do we allow you to study for longer and actually retain that information? So let's just work with that you're about 15 years old. Okay, you can move that however old you are. If you're about 15 years old, you have about 15 minutes of really high level concentration. So what do you do at that 15-minute mark? How are you going to extend your concentration? You have to take a brain break. Now, I don't mean just stop learning. And I don't mean just fiddle on your phone for a few minutes. I don't mean that. What I mean is you need to incorporate movement somehow. So whatever seat, chair, lounge you're sitting on while you're studying, you have to get up and move. The reason for that is because for your brain to be operating at that high capacity, it needs oxygen. I love this quote from David Souza, and he says, if you're sitting in your seat, then the blood is going to pool in your feet and in your seat. You need to move. You need to move to get that blood pumping and that oxygen back up to your brain. So your brain break might look like you going for a walk. Now, while you're walking, I want you to be teaching yourself. So say out loud while you're walking 3 things that you just learnt about. Now, I don't mean 2 steps. You need to go for like at least 20 steps out, 20 steps back, sort of a walk to get that blood pumping. But say out loud the things that you've just learnt. Now, not only have you got excess oxygen to your brain, you've had that little brain break, but you've also said something out loud that's going to help you retain what you just learnt. This is a winning formula. Throw a ball. Get up, throw a ball, and every time you catch it, say one key word and its meaning. Write some key points on some post-it notes and go and stick them around your house. Okay, go and stick them on places that you'll visit later. So stick one on the fridge, stick one on the back of the toilet door, stick one on the shower screen. Go and stick them around your house. You're moving, you're still engaging with the content, and you'll see them later and it will spark that memory as well. I really hope that you found this video helpful. I hope that it's given you some tips on how you can change your study habits to really retain the knowledge and make sure that your time is productive when you're studying. If you found this helpful, please like and subscribe to my channel, and please feel free to share this video with your friends. Thanks.